For the AFL Hunter Central Coast, this is the Mark and the Mike podcast with Oliver Croft.
G'day and welcome to the Mark and the Mike. I'm Ollie Croft. This week we have an extra special Anzac round treat. Recorded down in the Adelaide Street Clubhouse, it is with great pleasure I bring you episode 7 of the podcast, Back to Back Bombers. In this episode, we'll be chatting with some of Killarney Vale's eldest and most respected names. In part 1, we take an overall view of the Bombers with new Club President Corey Shackleton. And in part 2, strap yourselves in because we have 3 massive clubhouse names. Brooke Turner and Beth Wood join me to talk how the women are tracking to the club's first ever three-peat. And then Josh Mifsud chatting everything Men's Cup, including a reflection on the 2022 Grand Final. Let's get into it straight away with Corey Shackleton, President of the Killarney Vale Bombers.
Fantastic. Very excited to be here.
Look, Shaq, thanks so much for having us down here at Adelaide Street. Obviously, with the picturesque views over the ground and your team's training, do you ever get to this point of the season and just go, oh, can't wait for it all to kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really awesome time of the season, I'm sure, for every club when you've got long days and warm weather and the ground looks $1 million. But yeah, I can definitely say whether it's a player or a coach or whatever capacity, it gets to this time of year and you get pretty itchy for round one and it just can't come quick enough.
Yeah, I love that response. So you're president of the Bombers this year. Can I ask how you came by this position and more particularly the AFL world in general?
Yeah, well, it's been a bit of a long journey. Like I grew up on the Central Coast, played a lot of different sports, kind of growing up as a kid. I did a lot of swimming and soccer, a bit of a rugby league, and kind of had a bunch of mates at school that got to about year 12 and kind of said, hey, let's give this AFL thing a go. We can come down to Killarney Vale and throw a team in, and we basically did that, and there's mates out of that I still run around and play footy. Jeff McLean and Justin Daly and Daniel Curtis. There's all these people that ended up playing for 200 plus games at Killarney Vale. So that started my love for the game. And the moment I walked in the door here, it felt like home. Our president then, Ian Grenlin, who's a bit of a stalwart around the chaps, I suppose, was just so welcoming. And this place become, I guess, a home of a whole bunch of different family really for me. And then played footy here, my whole kind of senior career, and love footy. Finished playing and never dreamt of being a coach, but I think Lee Matthews said it, when you can't play, you coach. So I fell into that arrangement, and that was probably not out of a desire to be a coach, but more out of the love for the football club and wanting to give back. So I did that for a number of years in an assistant coaching role, and then in 2019 stepped into the senior coaching role, again, not by any plan of mine, just by a phone call to say, hey, we need a senior coach and can you have a crack at it? So yeah, did that for 7 years and loved that as well. That was so different to playing. And then got to the end of that journey last year. The club was lucky enough to secure Robbo. So Ben Roberts, who's moved up from Sydney. And, it was a time for me to give it away anyway. I think the playing group needed a change and I was getting pretty tired. I don't know how Bishy does it, but I did it for 7 years and I was pretty cooked. So, and then, I got to the end of that and thought, hey, I've got a lot of spare time now and I still love the footy club. Our president, Paul Forster, who's I think been in the chair for 15 years before me, was looking for someone to take his place. Never something I ever imagined that I'd ever do or dreamt to do. And one discussion led to another, and next minute I'm president of the footy club. So it's exciting, it's daunting, and I'm learning a lot as I go.
Yeah, absolutely. So Killarney Vale, one of the most respected clubs on the Central Coast, founded in 1978 with 2 men's and women's Black Diamond Cup premierships since 2000. The Women's Cup side are coming off that iconic back-to-back premiership last year against Newcastle City, exploded into extra time. The Men's Cup side, premiers only 4 years ago, so still only young in that sense. But where are the Bombers heading in season 2026, Corey?
Yeah, it's a bit contrasting, really. I mean, the women are such a powerhouse now and they're so well set up. Brad's got them humming along, so they're almost in a bit of a mode where they just know what needs to get done. They seem very driven towards the three-peat, which is awesome. It's something that as a footy club we've never done. We've never won 3 premierships in a row in our history, so that'd be pretty special for us. So they're in good shape. They've recruited some good players. They've got some people returning, which is awesome. And then, we look to the men's program and there's been a real change in the era. Robbo's come on board and he's brought a heap of new faces, and the kind of people that we need, I think, in our group. Some real senior players, that have played some senior footy in Sydney and the Sandful, some right of top end talent that really supports, I guess, our younger list, which is probably where we lacked a little bit in the last few years, was just that bit of depth. So yeah, the program itself, when you look across it, whether it's the men or the women's, the numbers at training have been amazing. There's a real excitement around the group. So hopefully, from a Killarney Vale perspective, it's a three-peat for the women and there's a premiership for the men.
At Killarney Vale here, how does the club measure success? Is it through premierships? Is it where you finish on the ladder? And what would success look like by the end of this 2026 season for you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it probably varies across the club, and we've just gone on a journey actually about building a 10-year strategic plan, and we had a bunch of workshops with all our stakeholders, players and officials and life members around what does success look like was a really big part of it. And I think for example, from a junior club perspective, it's about participation and enjoyment. We don't really celebrate junior premierships. It sounds horrible, but they're nice. But it's about kids coming and playing and having fun and just seeing the game grow. And for us, we want to continue to just see every kid that wants to walk through the door play footy. And that's success from my end, is if we can continue to build and grow as a junior base. And then probably from a senior club perspective, it's probably a bit twofold in my view. There's the obvious success, which is the wins and losses and premierships, but there's also the cultural piece, which has been a huge part and I'm very passionate about, is just making sure that we're good people and that we do the right things in our community and we represent ourselves in a way that probably demonstrates that we're better people for our time at the club. It's hard to measure. It's much easier to measure wins and losses, but yeah, I think this year though, if we want to focus on the football side of it and the senior program, I would think that the women would be rightfully aiming at three-peat, and for the men, they're shooting to be in a grand final and see how they play. But I think that's a realistic goal that we'd have, is premierships in both those senior grades.
With your playing group, you've obviously made a couple of big signings this season. We're going to touch on that in a minute, but across your senior competition, you obviously got your juniors flowing up. What connection between your junior and senior programs across the club, how important is that?
Well, yeah, it's massive. I think you get caught, I know I did as a player, and probably to a lesser extent as a coach, but I learnt the lesson. But you get caught in this kind of fantasy that people are going to just turn up. There's a guy from Victoria or there's a girl from Victoria that's just turned up. Oh, heaps good. They're going to be awesome. And that happens, but it's not something you can bank on. Like over my 30 years at the footy club, there's probably been 6 or 8 players that have rocked up from Victoria that have turned up and changed the game for you. So it is about junior progression, and all of our best players, as far as I'm concerned, across the journey have typically been junior footballers. Rick White, Josh Mifsud, these are Brendan Lewis, these are all junior footballers that have come through the ranks. So our transition from junior to seniors is massive, as in it's a really important focus, and probably something we've lacked a little bit in the last 4 or 5 years. We haven't had a great swell of juniors coming in, and it's hurt us a little bit, but there's a really good crop now that are starting to poke their nose in the senior footy, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's great to hear, having more juniors coming into Adelaide Street. Let's talk a bit about the future. As you know, Corey, Cardiff Hawks and the Warnes Bay Bulldogs, those two clubs playing on Anzac Day has sort of become the local equivalent of Collingwood versus Essendon at the MCG. But this year, it all sort of changes, because for the first time in the league's history, you guys, the Bombers, will host Baddo Bay on Anzac Day here at home in round 3. So, it must just give you shivers thinking about the crowds that will come through and watch this clash.
Yeah, 100%. It's something we've toyed with, and I think being the Bombers, there's a bit of an Anzac Day tie there every year. But I think this year, with Anzac Day landing on a Saturday, it seems logical in a sense. And we had some preliminary discussions with Baddo, and they were interested in the concept. They kind of come forward as well, and we had some chats with the local diggers and the RSL, and they were really supportive of the concept. So it's kind of grown from there. We've got both sides have got their special Guernseys designed and on order, and we'll have the Cup men on first at 12, and then we'll have the Cup women at 2:30, and I think it'll be a fantastic day. And like you said, I think there's something special about getting to play on Anzac Day, and I think it'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting. Looking forward to it. Although it is a long season ahead, can you reveal to us what the Cup sides have been up to in preparing for the season ahead and what they're most looking forward to, maybe?
In terms of what they've been doing, probably a pretty similar pre-season structure for the women. Brad's got a pretty settled program now. They had their pre-season camp up at Seal Rocks, and a really good turnout up there, and there's good buy-in across the program. But I think there's a bit of experience that's probably coming in to how Brad's managing the players and the season as well. Like, it is a long season, and when you play deep into finals and you've won back-to-back premierships, you've got to give players due rest, and you don't want to burn out in round one. So I think they've been quite measured across the women's program, but had a really good hit out in the pre-season game last week. Dominated through that, which was great. Had a really good win. So far their performances in terms of the pre-season have been great, and I think they seem really just focused on getting that job done, and I think they know what needs to be done. Whereas for the men, it's probably been a little bit different. It's been a new face and a new style. Robbo's come in with a really clear game plan that he wants to see executed, and spent a lot of time almost since the first training session on that game plan and trying to build that education with the players. A lot of new faces coming in too, so there's been a lot of kind of building that rapport and understanding each other. We went to have 3 trial matches for the men. 1 got cancelled, and the women had 2 and had 1 cancelled. So I think for the men, having the 2 trial matches has been really good, just to get those games under their belt. Had a really good hit out, lost by a kick after the siren against Camden last week. So I think where they sit is at the moment, it's just a level of eagerness and excitement in terms of going forward. And I reckon both teams just can't wait. We get to play here round 1, which is always pretty cool. And I think they're chomping at the bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked before about the Men's Cup side being premiers in 2022. Sort of came over your crosstown rivals, Terrigal Avoca. Is there anything particular about that year in terms of game plan or technique or anything like that stands out that potentially you'd be looking to replicate, or you're trying something new? Has the direction since that premiership sort of moved? Same line or different?
It's a bit of a story. I mean, I could talk about 2022 forever because obviously I like it. I think in 2022 we were quite structured in terms of the way we play. We had a really big focus on our forward defensive press. We knew we had a key forward in Rooster and Brandon Lloyd. We had some good targets. So we had a deliberate way we wanted to move the footy and a very big focus on defence. And then that stuck with us for a few years. And then I know last year we tried to change things up. We knew we didn't have the personnel. So we tried to go with a more attacking brand of football just to move the ball forward at all costs. And we just probably didn't have the depth. We made 56 players play through first grade through injuries and other things, and we just couldn't sustain that. And with that style of footy, we just couldn't execute, although when it worked, it was good. I think for this year, it's probably tipped on its head a lot. Robbo said he's very structured with how he wants to play defensively, and has a very deliberate method of moving the ball forward, and it's different. It's different to 2022, and we've probably got a different form of strike power up forward. We've got a three-prong probably forward line now with Logan Mahallam, Brandon Lloyd and Nick Sklanvelt, who's come from Coffs Harbour. All 3 of them really good, clean set of hands, and if we can give them a good run at the footy and be smart in our forward line, they'll be pretty damaging. So, structurally we're probably a little bit more balanced, I think, this year potentially than what we were in 2022. In terms of experience, probably just got to see how that plays out in terms of running power on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look over to the Women's Cup side, and they're hunting for the three-peat. So mentioned before, it would be the first time in your club's history. Does processes change this season? You said the pre-season looked pretty similar. Does anything else really change for you guys?
Yeah, and to be honest, this is the hard thing for me as a president, is I don't get to get into the detail as much. I understand the men's program a little bit because my son kind of is involved in it, so I get to see a bit more of it. But from a women's perspective, there's not a huge turnover in terms of players, and there's not a huge turnover in cattle, I suppose, in that sense. So a couple of new faces, but it's a lot more stable than the men's program. So from what I've seen, I don't think it's as much of a wholesale change in playing style because the personnel are quite similar and it's worked. So from what I've seen and in my discussions with Brad, it's very much some tweaks and some adjustments to see it evolve rather than wholesale changes.
Okay, cool. You mentioned it before, several new signings. One of them's coming from Coffs Harbour. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because there's been some big talk throughout the league, and the spotlight is firmly on the red and black this year.
I mean, we've been really excited by the signings that we've got. Obviously, we push them out through socials, and we're really keen on, kind of celebrating that when we see players come to our club. So, we've got 3 players that are coming through from Coffs Harbour that are just keen to test themselves, what they see as, the next level in terms of football challenge. A ruckman, a full forward and an on-baller, which is nice. All played in a premiership last year. Very mobile. Wallow's big, tall, mobile ruckman, heart of the contest. He'll be fantastic. Pikey will play through the middle, probably on the wing, and he won a league medal up there last year, and tough at the footy and really good ball user. And then the noodle, Nick, who plays forward, I said he's got a really clean set of hands and a really good mover. So really good kind of addition to us there. And then on top of that, there's some experience coming through. Alex Goodall, he won 2 Phelan medals. He played in the O&M, played at Pennant Hills. He's come on. He's just a solid on baller, massive build, scary unit. I don't even want to go near him and match him when he runs around. He's a big boy and strong and a good ball user. Potter, the same thing, come from Pennant Hills, played a bit of time with the Sanford, really good. And then we've got Josh Allen, who's come from up in Queensland, played in the Quaffle, played in the Queensland, not just Queensland, but down in Tassie as well. So some really good experience that's coming in, and Nate Smith's back too from the Quaffle, which is super handy. So heaps of new faces, and there's probably others in the mix I forgot, to be honest. It's actually been a real influx of new blood, which has been really good.
And that's really great to hear. You guys finished 5th last year on the Men's Cup ladder, which, was just on the brink of finals. So you actually finished above Cardiff, which was 2024's premiers. What I'm keen to know is that these new signings, with what you already had, you got really close to finals. With these new signings, how far do you think the team will go this year? Grand final, premiership, or would what you'd be looking for is just an improvement on last year?
Yeah, I think... me personally, and I'm sure for Robbo it's the same, probably a bit more bullish than that. I think from what we've got, we want to win a flag. You don't come into a season thinking, it's a bit different to juniors. You don't come into seasons and think, if we go a bit better, that'd be nice. I think we've done enough in terms of the recruitment. I think the pre-season's been strong enough, and I think the game plan's sound enough that there's no reason why we can't win a premiership. But, we know that we're coming against some established, sides in Terrigal and Newcastle City, and I think Warners Bay is going to be really hard to beat. So it's not like you recruit a few players and you win a flag. You need things to go your way. You need a bit of luck with injuries, player availability, and the weather. So, but yeah, from our end, for us, it's premierships in both cup grades is the goal.
Now, Shaq, I've been here on a Saturday where the front of this clubhouse has just been absolutely heaving, the cheering. It's great. So, it's the place to be on a Saturday afternoon. Can you sort of tell us a bit about the culture that gets around the Killarney Vale community and what that does for your sides on the field?
Yeah, I mean, in my time, I've actually never got to really sit upstairs and have a beer and be part of that kind of crowd. I've either been a player or a coach, so I'm looking forward to enjoying it. But it always was a fantastic place to feel as a player. You play under the clubhouse, and it was always a really good atmosphere and vocal. And I think what it does for the players, like any home ground really, is you turn up with excitement because you're playing at home. And I think to have this facility and have the Oval in the state that it is, in terms of it just being pristine and what we consider to be the best facility in the league, it's awesome. Sometimes you feel like you're taking the piss, to be honest, about how good the facility is that we have. And we want to extend on that. A lot of work I was saying when we were chatting earlier, we had a market day at our trial match the other week, and we had 20 market stalls set up out the back, and we had all sorts of people coming through from the community. We had Mr. Whippy here, and all sorts of coffee vans, and people selling beef jerky, and handmade, doilies and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, awesome. And it was a really cool vibe, and that's what I want home games to be as we go forward, is something that's got a bit of energy and a bit of vibe, and the community can buy into it. You can wander down and just enjoy watching footy.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds like a great goal to have for the season as well. So tell us about how special Adelaide Street Oval is to the fans and the uniqueness it has about it, with the Bombers being the sole sporting club operating out of this ground. Yeah,
it's a bit of a luxury in one way, but we pay for it in a sense. But yeah, it's great. We used to have baseball here, and probably about 4 or 5 years ago, the club folded that ran out of here from a baseball perspective, and they decommissioned the baseball nets and other things that used to happen. And we at that point, our council was looking to have cricket here, which obviously creates challenges from a ground use perspective, cricket pitches, the whole box and dice. So we at the same time started discussions with council about entering into a lease so that we have sole control over the management of the ground, which we were lucky enough to secure. So where that leaves us now is that essentially we have full autonomy essentially in terms of the maintenance of the oval. We have to pay for everything though, so it's a costly exercise. But yeah, the ability for us to train here all pre-season, the ability for us to play and open and close the ground as we see fit is great. It's a bit of a burden at some times. It's definitely a costly exercise, but it means a lot to the players to know that we can turn up here and this is our bit of dirt. So we have a lot of working bees and things over the off season to lay sand and top dress, and the players buy into it, and you feel like there's a bit of blood, sweat and tears that you've poured into the place. So I think it makes it a bit more special.
Corey, tell me, it's full time on a freezing Saturday, a bit of rain, it's the prime of the winter, the footy season. Say a new club such as the university team, they've just played here against Killarney Vale and they finished their game, they've gotten on the bus and they're going back to Newcastle. At the end of that game, how do you want Killarney Vale to be remembered as a footy club to that club?
Yeah, I'd hope that they come here and feel welcome. Like, we love the clubs that come upstairs and do the awards after the game, and they socialise for a little bit and just enjoy footy for what it really is at this level, which is just a bit of fun, and it's serious, and we want to taste success, but at the end of the day, we do it for enjoyment. So I'd hope that when they leave, they feel like they come here and it was a tough day in the office, but they felt welcomed and they felt accommodated, and they enjoyed the experience. There's definitely football experiences that you have at away venues that are far different and far more enjoyable than others, and I hope we're one of the enjoyable ones.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So season 2026 just around the corner, so close to 6 months of euphoria and disappointment all in equal measure. What message are you sending to the Killarney Vale Bombers, to the rest of the competition from the Bombers?
I think it's going to be an interesting watch. I think the message would be, in my view, I hope you've got us in the first 6 weeks. I think there's going to be a bit of building going on in those first 6 weeks, particularly for the men, and probably I think the women will warm into the season. I really feel like once we hit our straps, it's going to be there's going to be some good footy coming out. So listen, my message is going to be for everyone that as always, everyone's going to be sussing everyone out for the first 4 or 5 weeks, and really looking forward to seeing how we shape up against Nelson's Bay in round 1. But we're coming. That's all I can say. We're gunning for a flag. So,
footy clubs often provide a lot more than just coming and kicking a footy on a Saturday. What has Killarney Vale done for you, Corey?
Oh, I don't know. Lots, to be honest. Like I said, when I first came here, it was it was like a family. I'd come from sports like, particularly say soccer, where you wouldn't even know senior players, you wouldn't know who the senior coach was, you wouldn't know if there was a president. You just trained and you went home and you were just a number. I came here on my first night, and I was the first one here because I always get here early, and the senior coach at the time came over and he shook my hand and he said, "Mate, come over to the clubhouse over here and I'll show you around," and this was the senior coach, and there's the first guy I'd ever met, and he shook my hand and he took me out of the clubhouse, and I was a 16 or 17 year old, so that kind of set the tone for me, and I've made lifelong friends here. We go away once a year with blokes that I've won premierships with, and blokes that are just people that I've known through the club now that are lifelong friends. So this club is the closest thing to family, apart from my family, that I have.
Thanks, Corey. What a fantastic insight that was to the Killarney Vale Bombers, and certainly some strong plans being thought out for the future. If you enjoyed that one, roll right on over to part 2, where we catch up with Bomber royalty Brooke Turner, Beth Wood and Josh Mifsud, right here on the Mark and the Mike podcast.